I want to invite our new friend, Dondi Rodriguez, to come and share a simple story about an ordinary person in his life whom God is using in extraordinary ways. Dondi?
Thank you, Joel. This person in my life, my earliest memories, she was a drug addict. She was a prostitute. And I remember my earliest memories of looking outside this window where she was forcibly removed because I was kept from her, my mother. She could not come into a room near me, and at times being taken away in handcuffs by the police. I know one time I was raised by my great-grandmother coming home from her job that she cooked for priests to earn money to feed me, coming home to our small apartment and finding every piece of furniture except for a bed taken out and had been sold for drugs. That was my mom. So, a hero, not at that time, but it wasn't always so. See, my mom came to this country in the mid-50s with great aspirations and dreams. Being raised in Puerto Rico by my great-grandmother as well, losing her father at a young age. Her mother was only 15 when she was born, so my great-grandmother was raising my mother and my grandmother all in the same house, these women together. Also losing her grandfather in a storm in Puerto Rico. So this was just a household of women living together and existing, coming here in the mid-50s and not being able to speak English or knowing the culture, found herself being bullied in school. And she turned to a local street gang to find affiliation and camaraderie, which led to drugs and which led to a drug addiction. My mother was forced, as I said earlier, to prostitute her body to get money for drugs. And it was a person in her life, David Wilkerson, who started a place called Teen Challenge, who came, a little country preacher from Pennsylvania, went to the streets of New York City and made that his community and his calling, and found my mom in the streets and looked down at her and another woman that was with him, that was working with him, named Ruth, who was not a street person, was not in that culture, did not understand what it was like to be in drugs or live that type of life, but understood that God had called them to do that, reached down to my mom and said, "We want to introduce you to someone that could heal your life." My mom hadn't even stopped taking drugs when I was born. She left me at the hospital after giving birth. A friend of hers brought to the hospital a fix, a dose of heroin so she can get high. And a day later, put her clothes on and left me at the hospital. So not even giving birth to me had changed her life. And subsequently, I was born. I know you don't see that now, and I look pretty healthy, but I was born addicted to heroin as a small baby and had to stay in the hospital for a few months to recoup myself. But God had a plan for my mother, and He reached her, and it was at a Catherine Coleman service that she sat in the front row, kicking her drugs, having a nicotine fit, not thinking of God at all at any moment, at that moment, but she saw a lady crying as she sang, "He touched me, oh, He touched me," and all the joy that floods my soul. Something happened, and now I know He touched me and made me whole. My mom, right there in the front row, saw this lady weeping of joy with Jesus and said, "I want that. And God, if you are real, please let me be like that woman." And God touched her that day. And it was a few years later that I was able to live with her for the very first time. And she met a man, and they were married and immersed themselves in ministry in the streets of New York City, reaching people like themselves, young people that were lost in drugs. In time, they moved to Texas. They lived in Garland, Texas, and she saw an ad. It was called The West Side Story. And I know that we grew up on The West Side Story, the old movie, tonight, But this article talked about the West Side kids in that town of Dallas, Texas. And not knowing the streets, she found her way to these kids in the streets. And it was about these kids that were running the streets, no parents, on drugs. And she knew she had to do something. And so she started going into the streets and just talking to kids and filling her house with kids. She started a ministry called Street Church. And in that ministry, it was a place where kids and children can come and hear about Jesus and how their lives could be changed. You can show a picture of this dear woman. This is my mom right there with the Young Life t-shirt. Now, I know we work for Young Life. I represent the ministry Young Life, and people have seen that on my shirt, and they think that it's a vitamin supplement or something because of my age. And I know that I'm younger than some of you. I'm 56 today. But my mom right there this last year, she is 74 years old. And she has given her life to reach kids. My brother was killed in 1990 working with her in the streets, and he was shot. And that didn't slow her down. Oh, yes, she hurt and she pained, but she kept on going because she knew that lives mattered. My stepfather passed away 8 years ago in his sleep. That didn't slow her down. She knew that her life mattered for something. She quoted often Kennedy saying, "Some people see things the way they are and ask why. I dream of things that have never been and say, why not?" And that is my mom. She is my hero. Her life was changed by the mercy of God. And she has given her life. And at 74, I say, "Mom, why do you do this still?" Her schedule today, I get tired listening to all the things that she still does. And she hangs out with teenagers. Their music is crazy. They dress crazy. They speak funny. They're emotional. They're nutty. But she loves hanging out. And she says, "You know this? I know my time here is short. But I'm going to take as many of them with me as I can to heaven." And so she dedicates her life every day getting up to spend time with teenagers and to love them and to be Jesus to these teenagers. And she is a crazy woman. I love my mom. She has given me that in my life because I too have dedicated my life and our family to work with teenagers. You'll hear more about that in the next few months. I get a chance to come and talk. My mom, a very ordinary woman who God has chosen and is still using to do extraordinary things. Some people see things the way they are and say, why? I dream of things that have never been and say, why not? My mom, Cookie, and her kids, my hero. Thank you.